On August 20th, 1890, Howard Phillips Lovecraft was born. Though relatively unknown for his time, in the decades after his death, his creative works in sci-fi and literature novels paved the way for a new genre, cosmic horror. With countless adaptations and the solidification of his legacy, the Cthulhu mythos, into the mainstream, he's had a profound influence in creative culture and horror, and will continue to do so until the heat death of the universe. For the oldest and strongest emotion of mankind is fear, and the oldest and strongest kind of fear is fear of the unknown. Then, 108 years later to the day, your boy was born! For those outside the 10-ish people I'm making this video for specifically, my name is Milan, your local dweeb. I'm an avid fan of board games and video games alike, and I'm a slut for that Lovecraft shit. So when I saw Shut Up and Sit Down's review of Cthulhu Wars like 4 years ago, I became just a little bit obsessed with getting a copy. And so, wouldn't you know it, I officially own the 4th printing. Now, before I start, I would also like to note that as of me making this video, I have yet to actually play a game of Cthulhu Wars. This video is just me condensing the rules from what I read in the book into a video format. But so, why would I make a video when plenty of other people have already done it? Well, those videos are a bit long for my personal taste, and also I have stinky doo-doo brain, and I will forget to mention some stuff in the middle of playing something, and so I'm just gonna end up looking like a dick for purposely forgetting to explain certain rules during like a pivotal moment. I'm sure you all can relate, honestly. So yeah, I just wanted to make a simple, easy little, fun little, stupid little. So I just wanted to make a fun, easy little video for my friends to watch as a primer, basically. So that we're all just on the same level of stinky doo-doo brain when we actually play. It's also just a bad idea to do unless someone, asks. At least this way you're watching because you know you wanted to, or because you know me. For the sake of simplicity though, I will only be going over the core rules and a brief rundown of the faction expansions that I currently own. Also, you may be asking yourself, why? Why would I go so full in on a game I haven't even played? Well, personally, I found that I can generally identify whether or not a game will actually interest me just by doing some surface level of research into it. I mean, 2 years ago I got into Warhammer 40k and it basically went like this. Shit. Also, if anyone asks me how much this all cost, I will scream and pretend you never asked me that. So what is Cthulhu Wars? Well, Cthulhu Wars is a Risk-like board game made by Sandy Petersen, a jolly old monster and Lovecraft connoisseur who definitely did not personally witness Oblivion, working with coding demigod John Carmack during the production of the original Doom in the 90s. In Cthulhu Wars, you control your choice of Eldritch Abomination and its cult, the goal being conquering Earth and ending humanity. At the moment, you have 11 different primary factions you can choose to play from. While it's based on a dudes on the map style of play, where you paint your board in your faction's colors like you do in Risk, Cthulhu Wars presents you with multiple alternatives to competing and winning, with such win conditions ultimately just depending on who you decide to play as. But now then, here's how to actually play the game. The game itself is divided up into 4 phases: the actions phase, gather power phase, determine first player, and the doom phase. In the actions phase, you all take turns spending power doing one action at a time. One thing you can do is recruit a cultist to spread the influence of your cult and capture gates. You can create a gate to bring your Lovecraftian monsters into reality. Then you can summon a monster through said gate to strong-arm your way into opposing territories. You can move a unit to advantageous positions and visit their mums. You can battle to claim those positions. You can capture an enemy cultist to claim the spoils and gain more power. And you can Awaken the ghoul! To Godzilla your way into victory.
Sup dudes, I'm the cool Melan. I'm here to cover whatever notes this dipshit Melan forgot to mention. Note that to capture an enemy cultist, they must not have any of their faction's monsters protecting them in the same territory. However, unless they also have a goo in that territory, your goo can capture that cultist even if their monsters are present. Refer to this guide.
The player with the first turn marker spends 1 power to recruit a cultist, then passes the turn to the next player. Player 2 spends power to move a unit, and then passes their turn. Player 3 decides to summon a monster and passes the turn once it's done. Once everyone has had a chance to do something, it circles all the way back to the first player, and you repeat until no one can do anything, i.e., you run out of power.
Note, if you don't use your power, you lose it.
So how do you gain power? Well, everyone starts the game with 8 power, unless otherwise stated, and once the action phase is over, you start the gather power phase. This phase happens simultaneously. No shenanigans here, so just feel free to follow this guide. Gain 1 power for all cultists you have in play. Gain 1 power for every gate you control. Each player gains 1 power for every gate that is abandoned, aka not controlled by anybody. Earn 1 power for every enemy cultist you have captured that turn.
Note, make sure to return them to your opponent's bank the next turn.
And finally, check for any special abilities or effects. My fucking notes just fell over. Check for any special abilities or effects that might grant you additional power. Now, while your power tracker, listed over here, only goes up to 20, you are allowed to have more. To keep track of it, you should reset the marker's position to the nearest final digit of however much power you have. So if you have 22 power, you set your marker to 2, and then once you spend 3 power, you lower it down to 13. There's also a minimum power rule, which basically goes, if the person with the lowest power has less than half of the player with the most power, then that player is to add power until they equal about half of that amount, rounding upwards.
So if you have 6 power, and the most powered up player has 19, you will bump yourself up to 10. Just like you are, baby.
Once this is over, you move on to the determine first player phase. Whoever has the most power at this point in time becomes the first player, gains control of the first player marker, and can choose in which direction,
Clockwise or counter,
that the turn will proceed in. If 2 or more people are tied for the most power, the previous first player gets to choose who receives the marker. If you happen to retain the marker, you can choose to change the direction of the turn. But in the off chance that you tie with someone for the most power, but you were the previous first player, the person tying with you should get the marker. That's just a personal home rule that I think would be best to follow in this case. Lastly, you have the Doom phase. The Doom phase is ultimately where the winner of the game will be decided upon. To win, you must have your faction marker reach the space marked 30 along the Doom tracker. To advance down the Doom tracker, you will need to control gates. For every gate you control, you can move your marker down by that much. So 1 gate is 1, 2 gates is 2, 3 gates is 3, so on and so forth. This is the primary way to win, but during this phase there is an alternative way to move down the Doom tracker. This is done by performing rituals of annihilation. Starting with the first player, everyone will get the option of performing a ritual of annihilation. You can do so by spending power once, equal to the number of the next space on the track. If you've done so, you may also move your Doom marker up as many times as you have gates, and you may gain 1 Elder Sign for each of your faction's goos that are in play.
Note, you can gain Elder Sign tokens at various points in the game, and you can reveal them to gain bonus Doom points. Keep in mind that you don't need to use it right away, but once you use an Elder Sign token, they're spent permanently, and gone. They do not return to the bag.
Once the Roa marker reaches the instant death phase, the game will automatically end at the end of this Doom phase. If you have not yet gotten a chance to perform a Roa, you will still get to do it, but from then on it will cost 10 power for everybody. So, battling. Battling is something that you do during the action phase, but it's easily the most complicated thing that you can do of all the actions. The fucking book says so. So I'm just gonna give this its own little section so we can get through it. Don't worry, it's gonna be simple. So you got your standard D6. You make a roll. A result of 1 to 3 means nothing. A result of 4 to 5 is called a pain result. And rolling a 6 is gonna be a kill result. Note, there are faction-specific dice that you can use for battling. They use symbols rather than numbers. They're pretty neat, but yeah. Receiving a pain basically means that you have to remove one of your units from that space you were just battling in into an adjacent space that has no enemies in it. Although, if that territory is surrounded by enemies, like there's nowhere else to go, then you're dead, gone, bye, dead. Receiving a kill result is exactly what it means. That unit is dead. Note, when a unit dies, it returns to your unit pool, unless otherwise stated. Now, regardless of attacking or defending, whatever your opponent rolls, you get to choose how to apply the result. This will help prevent your most expensive units from being wiped off the face of the earth before you even had a chance to do anything with them. And also just having to keep track of HP, the hit points for every single unit. No. Just no. Do keep in mind though, your units and monsters will usually have an ability that influences the battle in some way, shape, or form. Like negating your opponent's rolls or how many dice you personally get to roll during the battle. And that's basically it. That's all you need to know to play the game. It's fairly simple and straightforward. The rulebook is just kind of wordy, in my opinion, but yeah, you can stop here if you really want to. But then you're gonna miss out on the faction previews. Idiot. So fucking strap in, because it's gonna get funky. Cthulhu. Great Cthulhu. The great old one that started it all. Just like in his debut in The Call of Cthulhu, the cult of Great Cthulhu is centrally themed around the aquatic, with deep ones and Shoggoths being the primary summonable monsters. You've even got regenerating Starspawn just to tank it out with your opponents. With Great Cthulhu, you're going to be a recurring menace. Just as Cthulhu recovered from his wounds when Johansen rammed his ship into him, after paying 10 power to summon him for the first time, each consecutive summoning of Cthulhu is only going to cost 4 power. You don't fuck with Cthulhu. When you're on the road, a yellow light usually means you gotta slow down. Sometimes you're just close enough to safely make it across, adding that little extra speed, but usually coming to a stop to wait for change. But with the yellow sign, you're the change in the world as you slam the gas, pedal to the metal to bring about desecration to every pedestrian who dared trust in the system of crosswalks. God, I hate driving in America. Just as my dumb little anecdotal alludes to, the yellow sign is all about conquering the world by bringing about its absolute destruction. You gain power by spreading desecration markers to as many territories as you possibly can. And what better way to bring on all that mayhem than by having not one, but 2 great old ones at your disposal. Summon the Yellow King to herald the arrival of so that he can with the amount of combat dice being tied to the position of the Roa marker. So yeah, if you like Kaboom, go yellow sign. Please be a responsible driver. This is just a bit.
A squid will scream at you. If you get a boner, we're killing you.
Do you like messing with people? Do you like making people's days worse off just by your mere existence?
Are you a Redditor?
Then the Crawling Chaos is just for you. Through the power of Red Bull fueled trolling. Through the power of Red Bull fueled throwing. Through the power of Red fueled what the f? Through the power of Red Bull.
Through the power of Red Bull fueled trolling, all your units, even your cultists, get wings. You're gonna be flying all over the place, annoying the ever-living shit out of your opponents. Like a hot summer day where you had no choice but to leave the window open, but you're still in the process of actually installing like the mesh to keep the bugs out. But the fly got in while you were doing it, and you just can't for the life of you smash that little bastard out of the air. And so every single time it just manages to fly away from you. And then every time it manages to fly out on its own, just as you're about to install the mesh again, whoop, the fly's back, so you keep trying to fucking smash it, and the cycle just repeats with it getting out and then going back in and out. And you just keep wondering if this purgatory is ever going to end at all, or if it's just gonna last for the rest of your life. And you just collapse on the floor, exhausted and defeated. And then the mosquito flies in and sucks out half your life force. Fucking Nyarlathotep. I'd like to note that I had to do 4 takes for this, because the camera stopped rolling every single time I got to this portion. Fucking Nyarlathotep. The Black Goat, the mother of all monsters, the eldritch abomination whose name I am too white to risk pronouncing. If you like the Zerg, the Flood, and in general just spreading your glorious color across the board, anything where you just shit out more disgusting and twisted writhing abominations than anyone could ever fucking dream of handling, then the Black Goat is the sugar mama you've been looking for. Also, you have ghouls. Ghouls. I'm not joking what I said earlier, by the way. I am way too fucking white. I took a DNA test last year just for the hell of it, like as a Christmas present for my mom. I got one for myself too. And I am basically 100% Eastern European. My lowest percentile is 2% Finnish, a country that only exists 50% of the time. Isn't that fucking on topic? And you know what? The ironic part is, I'm so Eastern European, my pagan ancestors were probably worshipping the Black Goat like, "Oh, chubby mommy, give me milkies." Opener of the Way. If you're familiar with that title, then you will know that this is the faction of Yog-Sothoth. Or to describe it simply, the faction of Rolf from Ed, Edd and Eddy. Because life has many doors, Ed boy. With Yog around, when one door closes for your opponents, no other doors open. Why? Because those are your doors. It's yours. Hire some Pinkertons. Hire some Pinkertons, because ain't nobody messing with your property. Your entire shtick is, you see this gate that I have in my possession? No. This gate that you've been amassing an entire force of abominations to forcefully take, no matter the cost? Well, fuck you, I'm taking it to Antarctica, bitch. As long as there are no gates in the territory you move it to, every territory is a potential target for conquering. And brother, you're the British Empire! The Sleeper is a faction of hentai degenerates. In lore, the cultists are a bunch of horny bastards with not a single spray bottle in sight, and their great old one is literally an ugly bastard. Just look at that bitch. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling scaroused. As far as I've gathered from a gameplay angle, your early game short-term strength isn't gonna be that much. But your late game, that's gonna be a problem for everybody. It's all about building up your forces over time to bitch slap your friends when they're at their weakest. Also, fun little thing I noticed is that they implemented some flavor into their abilities, as the Sleeper cult is known to be found underneath major cities where they
Don't
do orgies on the regular, and to reflect this, their main ability is called Death from Below, where you get to place the lowest cost monster in your pool into any area that you have a unit in. Now Jeff, I have a friend named Jeff who loves Gene Stealers and 40k and is also my Pathfinder GM. Jeff, I'm sorry, I did not know that this faction had like this kind of an ability by the time that I ordered all of my copies for Cthulhu Wars. So please, don't kill my second character. I did not mean to do this to you on purpose, please. The Windwalker, Ithaca, Mr. Spindledick himself. The spooky dude who has done absolutely nothing wrong. This faction is the Regigigas of Cthulhu Wars. You are a slow starter, but by God, once you get that snowball rolling, your snowball is gonna snowball. You know. This faction is also the second faction in which you can summon 2 Grey Old Ones, both of which provide tanky buffs simply by existing. So if you like the aesthetic of the freezing cold and the horrors that lurk within the blizzard, you're probably gonna like this faction. The Cho-Cho. Scare me. There was a lot of stuff in regards to their lore that wasn't entirely clear to me. Like, I couldn't really think of anything distinctive to say for them, which, don't get me wrong, like, they still sounded super duper interesting. My smooth brain couldn't put together anything to say about them. So please, don't take my experience with this as me condemning the faction. They had a lot of super interesting sounding things that I can't conjure straight out of my mind right now, but their rules. If you like complicated strategies and dynamics, then I think you'll get a kick out of them.
There's still fucking 3 more to go.
The Ancients. You are the Vengabus, and you're coming. You are the life of the party. Wherever you go, everyone's gonna love you. They have no other choice. Fun will be mandatory. You're gonna be erecting cathedrals, aka the party rock house, and using your fancy architecture and spell books to have the upper hand in negotiations. If you like power play and politicking in your games, then this will probably be the faction for you. I wasn't really able to find out much lore-wise regarding them. It's not the same case as the Cho-Cho, rather it's because they're more of a mishmash of various monsters and the factions that are in the Cthulhu mythos. So it should be noted that they don't really have their own Great Old One. Instead, you have the ability to summon 3 Yathans, which are an ancient race of monsters that lived beneath the crust of the earth long before. Which are an ancient race of monsters that lived underneath the earth's crust for long before humanity was even a thing. Overall, the faction really gives me the vibe of an evil of a bygone era that has long been buried, now seeking to lay claim to their throne on Earth once more. So if you want to kick some youngsters off your lawn and show them how to really party, go with the Ancients. Are you a cat person? Because that's all I have to say about this faction. I mean, literally, this whole faction is just abominable. Literally, this whole faction is just abominable space cats. Like, you have your Earth cats, cats from Mars, cats from Saturn, cats from Uranus. Oh yeah, and your Great Old One is fucking Bastet, an ancient Egyptian goddess that's represented as a cat person. I mean, shit, guys. This faction is so cat-centric, you don't even have human cultists. The Earth cats are your cultists. And I mean, fucking shit. This faction has so little to do with humanity that your home base is the fucking moon. I'm not a cat person, but I wish I looked into them so that I could have added them to my purchase, because they just seem like a really cool faction. That's all I have to say about them. Meow. Note.
I got a copy off eBay. It was minimally scalped. Just minimally. I also got these penguins. Last, but certainly not least, we have the Demon Sultan. Colloquially known as Azathoth, the blind idiot god, who is neither blind, nor an idiot, nor a god, but he's still one spooky boy. If you play this faction, you are playing with reality itself. All of our existence is just a dream. It is Azathoth's dream. And he is only kept asleep by, and let me get this right, he is only kept asleep by the maddening beating of vile drums and the thin, monotonous whine of accursed flutes. For him to awaken is to end everything we know. As described by a YouTube channel that is very near and dear to my heart, Tale Foundry described it, there is nothing to gain from calling on him, and quite literally everything to lose. Except you, of course. You have Azathoth on fucking speed dial. From what I was able to gather for this faction from a gameplay perspective, you're kind of slow to build up your forces as a faction. Not so much in the same way that the Windwalker or the Sleeper faction have a good late game. Rather, you just have a lot of conditions that you need to fulfill and a lot of high cost units that you need to build up in order to really have like a huge threatening presence on the board. But I mean, hey, playing as a faction that's literally responsible for reality itself already is pretty gnarly. Oh, and you also have 3 distinct Great Old Ones to summon from. So that's it. Those are all the main factions covered. Except I'm lying, there are actually 2 more that we have to cover. Why? Because fuck me, that's why. There's the Invasion, which is just hell from Doom. Like, the Great Old One is literally the icon of sin from Doom 2.
The longer the icon of sin is on Earth, the stronger he will become.
The reason I'm putting this faction away into its own little section is because compared to the other factions I already covered, they're not generally as available. Like, you can proxy them if you really want to, but they're actually meant to be taken from another of Sandy Petersen's games called Return to Planet Apocalypse. So like, actually getting a hold of this faction is going to be a lot harder compared to everything else, so I didn't really want to put it in the main section of the faction preview since it's not generally that well available. Because, like, you know, the rules were largely brought in for fun and just for the sake of having a 12th faction, which, as far as I'm aware, there isn't even a 12 faction board that you, or there isn't a 12 player board that's actually available to play on. So I guess just the more the merrier at this point. Then we also have the Azathoth faction. This is not a joke. There is a second Azathoth, or look, technically this is the first because it came out before Demon Sultan, but the main difference is that this is a neutral faction, meaning every player is allowed to use their spellbooks, their monsters, and even the Great Old One, Azathoth himself. Everyone has access to this. There. Now we're actually done. There is nothing left to talk about. Fuck off.
Well, at least I'm not Italian.